What's up, guys? This is Dustin Zimmerman with Game Time Discussions. I am joined today by Emery Cuzzy and Cam Selby. They are going to be our resident analysts for today. If you each want to introduce yourself and where you think your expertise lies.
Yeah, I can start. I'm Imrikazi. I mostly do draft stuff. I work through all this stuff and I watch all the prospects and go through everything. And then hopefully we can get, so since we're doing a mock draft today, it's early in the year. We haven't seen free agency. We haven't seen the combine, but we're going to be hopefully able to figure out some of these guys that are going to rise early and try to figure out where they're going to go.
Yeah, and I'm Cameron Selby. I'm the, NFL expert, figuring out who's going when and where and what's available, what's the biggest needs, all that good stuff. But this is Mock 1.0. We're recording this pre-NFL Combine. We're going to have a couple more and mock the mocks and all that fun stuff to look forward to in the next couple of months. But this one is basically just a straight up going to be the worst version of any mock draft that we do because it's just all speculative. 2 months plus away from the draft, plus no free agency. We don't know releases. There's like 8 teams over the cap that need to get under the cap by like the first week of March. So a lot of shockers, surprises, trade requests, all that stuff can massively have an impact on stuff like this. But we're going to do the best we can, have some fun while we do it.
Yep. So I'll pull up the board. This is going to be 1 through 8. Just kind of looking up there. I mean, it's pretty much. I think there's going to be a conversation, and Cam and I actually went back and forth when we were trying to set this up and put this together. But is it going to be quarterback, best defensive player, Travis Hunter versus Abdul Carter, and then quarterback again? We went quarterback twice in the first 3, so that's how I started, and that kind of shapes the draft from there. Cam Ward to the Titans, and then Abdul Carter to the Browns, Shedeur Sanders to the Giants, Will Campbell to the Patriots, Travis Hunter to the Jaguars, Mason Graham to the Raiders, Michael Williams to the Jets, and T-Mac Teteroa McMillan to the Panthers. So, yeah.
Yeah, with this one, essentially, this will have a huge effect on whether or not we know if Tennessee goes for a quarterback. There are other teams like the Jets and the Raiders that wouldn't be shocked if they targeted one of these two guys, traded up for him, whatever. By the way, there is no trades in this first 1.0 mock.
Yeah, of course.
We'll go trades moving forward, but right now this is just straight up 32 best fits, or what we viewed it as cumulatively amongst each other. But Cam Ward right now is the current favorite as of this morning via Vegas odds to go number 1 overall, which is at plus 100. Travis Hunter has actually jumped Abdul Carter to be plus 220, and then Abdul Carter is third, meaning that Shedeur is clearly behind the pecking order as QB1 in this class. Whether or not you believe in it, this is a story for another day. You'll have to watch our QB rankings when we put those out in the coming weeks. But it's kind of tough with Tennessee because there's just so many holes. But it's not like this is a roster that's just completely stripped down to the bones, ready to rebuild. Yeah. There are a lot of pieces that they did invest in last year, on defense especially, that were veteran guys that are in peak prime. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's a young roster that's just, like, for example, New England, how they just completely take it to the bottom, stripped it down to the studs. Now they have $100+ million in cap space to do whatever they want. Tennessee's kind of like, they have some cap space, but it's not like it's a guarantee that they're going to target quarterback with the first pick. But they should operate as if it's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull up, because we are talking about Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. I have a little graphic kind of just comparing the two of them. We have, of course, Tennessee going with Cam Ward first, but then Shedeur third. And so if you look at the graphic, the green is good. It's not so the the size of these graphics is based on the average for each position. But if you look up there, like turnover worthy plays, adjusted percentage, those two things are really two good things that Shedeur does. 81.6% is really high for adjusted percentage. 1.2% I think is the lowest in the draft class for turnover worthy plays. And then on the other side, you can see the time to throw, they're pretty even. Yards, about the same, but the touchdown to interception ratio was much better on the Cam Ward side over Shedeur. These two things, of course, are, we haven't talked about prospects and stuff, but these are the things that we kind of like look at in terms of quarterbacks to see who a better player is, because we start with stats, then we go to film, then we talk about, just an overview of like what could the upside versus the floor be for each of these players. When we talk about these two, the upside, and a lot of rankings is based on upside. it's on the Cam Ward side. Cam Ward has all the upside. He has the better arm. He has the more, he can make better, deeper, more complete throws. While Shadur is a kind of like a surgeon where he, dices up the defense in his own way of accuracy and pace on the ball and being able to, stand in the pocket rather than create with his legs. So both of these guys are interesting, but I think this is a really easy way to compare them in this graphic here and just kind of talk about what they're good at versus what they're probably not as good at. When it comes to the Giants, though, they're taking a quarterback no matter what.
You think so?
I mean, they could go free agency, but in this moment, obviously, we don't have any of that stuff. They have to take quarterback. Daniel Jones is gone. Drew Lock and Tim Boyles are both free agents. It's like Tommy DeVito?
Well, at the end of the day, I know for a fact they are going to dress this position in a
Yeah,
specific way.
for sure.
But it's basically coming down to whether or not they're going to go the veteran approach or they're going to go with the rookie quarterback approach. But retaining the staff like they did and retain the GM, how it's just like, hey, this was the opportunity to blow it up and start over with a new regime, new coaches, new quarterback, all that good stuff. Now there's a little smoke. I don't know how much I believe it, but hey, they're actually interested in trading for Matthew Stafford. And whether or not you believe what that will actually take place or occur, the flirtation of that makes it seem like it's more of an open game of, hey, I could target a veteran quarterback or a Sam Darnold or a Justin Fields or something, going that route instead of opting in and trying to invest a significant amount of, it's not necessarily assets because you're not paying quarterbacks on rookie contracts, but investing the time and energy into that and having Brian Daboll on this is the year to prove it whether or not you keep this job. I'm not sure necessarily if that will correlate with them also going rookie quarterback, because otherwise why'd you even retain him in the first place?
Yeah, no, I think the Stafford idea is cool. But I just don't know at this point, and that's why this obviously is a quarterback in this draft pick. It also makes when they talk about this stuff, it makes their actual number 3 overall pick more valuable, because then it's like, oh, they don't have to go quarterback. We could actually move up to their quarterback pick possibly and take a quarterback, say the Raiders, the Jets, like you said.
Yeah, so. And I also want to get the perspective of Dusty. Obviously, he puts in more watch hours on Saturdays in the fall than both of us combined probably. Maybe we watch more film or keep up with the tweets and all that stuff in the aftermath, but he is locked in. You don't get to hang out with Dusty on Saturdays. He is locked in at his TV, ready to watch every single game on the quad box or whatever platform avenue he does. Dusty, between these two quarterbacks, do you have any reservations about either of their games translating onto the next level?
So I was gonna ask you all about the eye test, since that's kind of all, the area, like you said, I'm watching as much as I can. I had reservations about Shadur early on, and I think throughout the year I realized that he had improved a lot, especially behind an offensive line that did not give him a ton to work off of. More so last year, a little bit better this year. But he looked a lot more poised in the pocket. Still had, like Emery said, a little bit worse touchdown to interception ratio, but it was actually a lot better than I expected it to be, based on what I saw last year. He seemed a lot less reckless this year and a lot more poised, and a lot of the plays where he would scramble out and make a play I assumed were about to be picks, and he ended up getting a first down. Helps when you have Travis Hunter out there too, and a couple other good receivers. But even regardless, he looked a lot better than I expected. One thing I am concerned about is that he's not going to have the best wide receiver possibly in the country, depending on who you asked for last year. And he'll be playing, NFL defensive players, not often college defensive players. That being said, he's going to have a better O-line more than likely compared to what he's been working with. Cam Ward, I'm almost scared of how nonchalant he was at times. It almost feels like this past year we saw it a bit with Caleb Williams, where he was so poised that when he got into a moment where he got thrown off of his comfort and confidence, he kind of got rattled more quickly. And that may just be, again, because he's a rookie and it's kind of expected. But that's my one fear with him, and kind of with both of them, is they're both such confident, good players, and they should be. But how will they handle that when they're not in a situation where they're put on a pedestal?
Right. No, that's absolutely fair. I think a big thing, like in Colorado, you know how like you'll get those things where they like make your boyfriend or make whatever, and they start pouring water into like the bucket for like good looks and stuff like that. Colorado put all their water in their skill players and none in their O-line. It was like, boop, Like that's the for the O-line. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
To be
of that
honest,
too.
when Dion made his move over from Jacksonville State to Colorado, I don't think
Jackson State.
or Jackson State.
Yeah, Jackson's.
Yeah, I don't think he had the rapport to build from the inside out. A lot of coaches like to do. His first quote was like, "I'm bringing my luggage," and it's Louis. That's not, oh, I'm going to bring these 6'6", 340-pound linemen, and we're just going to run the ball. It's no, we're going to have Dazzle, we're going to have Instagram handles on our backs, all that good stuff. And so, statistically, he thrived and performed well. I think a lot of my concern with him, Shador rather, would be just kind of intangibles and the leadership qualities. I didn't love certain interviews, sound bits. Sometimes he reacts on Twitter like his dad does, and it's like, I'm not sure if you're the caliber of player to be saying, I'm not going to be there at 6, like Dion did way back when, in the draft, whoever he was talking to regarding a non-top 5 pick. Those kinds of things are a little concerning, especially the fact that a lot of these positions and places that are available to take quarterbacks aren't necessarily the best situations. Last year, we had 5+ quarterbacks that thrived as rookies, and all of them went to situations that either had great skill players, great O-line, coaching, one of them to have all these successful rookie years. So I'm not necessarily concerned about both of them being late bloomers. Both of them will be age 23 going into their rookie year. We just saw Jaden Daniels, age 23 rookie season, have the greatest rookie season of all time as a quarterback. So that's not as much of a factor as much as, can you transition and translate, to have the intangibles, especially if you're going into a situation like we didn't bring up Cleveland, but they're on the board of bringing a quarterback. Even Deshaun's going to miss all of 2025 with an injury, so they have to address it as well. And I wouldn't be shocked if they invested in one of these guys. But do you really have confidence that either of these guys can just, in spite of that, make it handle and make it work?
And that's the problem too, is like the difference in this class versus last class. We actually had the conversation because we do prospect rankings, but we're also going to be doing prospect rankings versus class to class. And I did, me and you were talking about like, where does our number 1 quarterback fall in the top it versus last year's class? And I'm like, well, can I put him above JJ McCarthy? No, probably not. And JJ was our 5th quarterback because we had Bo Nix at 4, which we will have a very serious conversation about who had a better rookie season, him or Jaden Daniels, because statistically Bo Nix had a better rookie season. And so it's like, I don't know that I would like, if JJ was in this class, and we both said this, is like JJ would be the number 1 overall pick. It wouldn't be Cam Ward, most likely. So that's another question, is like, this is just a down class for this position and teams that are quarterback needy. But I could also see a situation where both of them drop past 3, especially if both of these teams are like, no, we're not doing this. So,
and then also you can't forget about Jackson Dart, which you'll have to tune into the video to see whether or not we have him in the first round. But there's a lot of rumors of him impressing and actually rivaling to maybe usurp one of these guys in the pecking order, or even become a top 10 pick himself, which just would be, you would think on the surface, being a shock. But like I said, there's so many teams in the top 10 that actually need to address this position. So say all these free agents or veteran quarterbacks don't go to those situations. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if, like, New Orleans stayed with Derek Carr and then was like, Spencer's not the guy, we're going to take Jackson Dart and hold a clipboard or something of that nature.
Which would be perfect for him.
Exactly. So all those things are on the board. I don't know if either of these guys or even Jackson Dart would break our top 10 in terms of overall prospects. Again, you'll have to tune in for our prospect rankings video when we release that on our first look. But, I mean, the situations are there or the opportunities at least are there to be selected. So you're going to push others down as well.
I mean, like you said, the Raiders, the Jets, and things like that. Let's go to the next one. Abdul Carter, going to the Cleveland Browns at number 2. Our number 1 player on our big board. I'm not gonna just withhold that information. It's okay. Yeah. We're just gonna say it is, because he's probably.
I don't think it'll change.
No, it's not. You should see who's number 2. We'll talk about number 2 later. No, but yeah, he was just amazing. A really cool thing about him, he played inside linebacker, moved down to D end. He's basically Micah Parsons reincarnate for
same number, same team.
The situation, the idea. He actually plays a lot like him. I actually see a lot of and guess what? Teams are not going to make a second mistake missing on Micah Parsons. Think about that. Like, we saw Micah Parsons fall to 11. 12. Oh, yeah, 11 was switch picks. Then, all right. So falls to 12. That's not going to happen with Abdul Carter. They're going to be like, oh, this guy actually had snaps at edge, unlike Micah Parsons, who was just a situational rusher, and he had a 22.6% win rate. I'm just going to say he's the guy, right? Like, that's just, I think teams just have to go there. 12 sacks this last year, 66 pressures. After the first game where he played against West Virginia and got like a 40 for his PFF grade, all of a sudden he was like 80s, 90s the whole rest of the year. And he's so good. He's just very good at football, and a defensive player that you can put in multiple places, do a lot of things with. The Browns need good football players. They're going to be losing Myles Garrett, most likely. I'm pretty sure it will end up happening. And if they don't, and it's Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter, sure. Like, that's that's really awesome.
Yeah,
So,
this team is on the verge of just breaking it down to the studs and starting over. They're second to last in cap space, negative 30 million as of this moment. If you want to check out our last week's AFC North breakdown, we'll go into further detail about why or what direction we think they will be going in, and what to look forward to and all that stuff. But the good positive side of it is they do have the number one total draft capital power ranking according to Tankathon, which is basically puts a numerical value on all your picks and then ranks it your overall capital. And so they are number one there. And so essentially it's just going to come down to picking the best player available every single time. And with Deshaun being out the entire season, very likely, and them not being able to move on from the contract, other than some provision comes into place and they're able to weasel their way out of guaranteed money, they're stuck. And it's going to be a shit year, similar to what we saw in New England, where they just broke it down. They had money last year to invest, unlike the Cleveland Browns this year, but they chose not to, and they just re-signed their guys, and we're like, we're going to 2025, and we're going to figure out from there. Cleveland, they're in the just transition of it's time to break it up. A lot of veterans that they've invested in are moving on. Nick Chubb, it's going to be weird seeing him in another uniform or even possibly not in the backfield anymore as a Brown. Jedrick Wills, their left tackle, no longer working out due to injuries and all that stuff. Several defensive role players, and then also Myles Garrett is the big fish. He's the best pass rusher, defensive player they've ever had. And him requesting a trade formally, they're saying that they're not going to trade him, but if somebody offers you 2 ones plus something else, which is warranted, you need to take that. There's no point in just wasting his career like you did Joe Thomas. Sell high, because next year he's going to be 30. Say he has a down year because of
playing
being
for the
2
Browns.
15, playing for the Browns.
I get it. Yeah, for sure.
All of a sudden, 2+ first-round picks and other becomes, hey, I might give you a third-rounder for him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you missed the opportunity to sell high when you could have.
Yep, for sure. But
do y'all have any reservations on Mr. Carter? Any issues? Any fears with him?
I mean, no, not really. He played hurt in the playoffs and still killed it. So no, I have no fear.
Any injury concerns then?
No,
I think that's all healed. He should be good to go.
Yeah, he'll be great. No, he's the number one player for a reason. He is a lot, like, there's a lot less risk and possibly, one of the highest ceilings in the whole class. So definitely a guy that you should.
A lot of people will be hyping up because of the dual threat ability that we really haven't seen in our generation's lifetime. The amount of time that Travis, he has really vaulted up a lot of people's prospect rankings. And it's no shot on Travis Hunter, I don't even know if anybody belongs in the same tier as Abdul Carter, it's very rare that you see, hey, it's just one guy and then everybody else is going to be going. That's kind of how it feels right now. And I'm not sure what anybody right below them can do to change that.
For sure. Going over to the next team, we did just kind of allude to them. It is going to be the New England Patriots at 4. We sent Will Campbell there, and I just want to read some stats off. 52 sacks given up by this offensive line last year. Everybody on their offensive line had basically, left tackle had a 54 grade, left guard had a 48.6, center had a 58.7, right guard had a 65.2, and the right tackle had a 38.4. He can replace somebody. That's what I wrote down. He can replace somebody. I am not as high on Will Campbell just as a prospect at the left tackle position as a tackle. He's one of the best players in the draft class, but I don't know that I see him as a tackle. So that'll be something that we'll talk about as we get into our individual ranking position-wise. But I think a lot of people are going to have Will Campbell going forward to the New England Patriots.
Right, and last year they actually ranked dead last overall as a PFF graded offensive line.
Yeah.
You alluded to how many sacks, pressures they gave up. On top of that, not having a ton for Drake May to work with, and he did well in spite of it. The stats won't show it, but he passed the eye test in a lot of ways when I did click in and watch some New England football. But they have the most cap space this year, and they're going to be really just overhauling this roster. Mike Vrabel was my favorite hire of all the coaching carousel that took place. Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. And on top of that, he has a track record. As soon as he went to Tennessee, what did he do? He invested inside to out on both sides of the football and became one of the better offensive lines, better run games, and then also better defensive lines. New England doesn't really have a lot of mainstays on either side in that regard. So I'm kind of on the fence of like, I'm not shocked if they go in any other direction. Offensive line needs to be addressed in one way, and they're the team because they have so much cap space. We're going to know a lot of what they did a couple weeks, a month from now, and then that may change our mind on how high, Will Campbell goes or anything of that nature. Because even though we're not as high on him as like a tackle overall, I still think he's one of the safest offensive linemen
by far. Absolutely.
To pick, and they just need mainstays that can be there a decade plus and move forward and start a new regime.
I think that Will Campbell's best position could be center, and I think that if he played center, he's a perennial All-Pro type of guy. But it's just, will they put him there? Because like if you're drafting number 4 overall, you're not picking a center fourth overall.
Right.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead, Dustin.
I was just gonna say that'd be a crazy jump to throw a guy from tackle to center for the 4th overall pick. I'm surprised to hear you of all people saying that.
Well, that's the thing. Like that's why I say he's not as high on our prospect ranking overall, because of the fact that he's just, to me, not necessarily a left tackle. 3.2% quarterback pressure percent, 2 sacks given up this year, 18 total pressures. That's actually ranked in almost the bottom for left tackles or for tackles in this class. So it's just, can you trust him at tackle? He did have an amazing 2023 season that you just can't overlook, but that is a Jaden Daniels season with a running quarterback that is a better athlete than Garrett Nussmeier. So there's a big difference in those types of quarterbacks and how they help offensive lines out. That's just something you have to look into. But we'll move over to the next 2 picks. These 2 are guys that we're not brushing over these 2 guys. It's not that. I put them in the same slide because it's just the fact that they're both still here on the board is really crazy for a lot of drafts. Travis Hunter has been seen picked at number 1 overall. He's going at 5 for us. So Jacksonville gets a steal, most likely. They probably needed interior defensive line more than they needed wide receiver / cornerback. But you probably can't pass on the talent. First team All-American, Heisman Trophy, Ben Eric Award, Biletnikoff, all the things. So Travis Hunter to Jacksonville. And then the Raiders pick Mason Graham, who's the best available player by far at this point. I mean, he is a difference maker. He is an absolute freak and one of my favorite players in the whole draft. So getting these 2 guys this late is awesome for both of these teams.
Yeah, both of them are really strong players. And with New England, if they picked either one of these guys, I don't think we'd bat an eye. The thing with New England is that they actually have a really strong cornerback, and that's kind of, as of this moment, Travis Hunter is working out the combine at corner. So if he prioritizes corner and is like a wide receiver 2 in an offense, like that's fine, and that's probably what I would best suit him as a role for.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I think
but
that's
at
what
the
he
same
should
time,
do.
like they have Christian Gonzalez there. He's already a strong corner, and on top of that, Christian Barmore, who missed most of the year with I think it was blood clots, and Keon White, pretty good 2 interior pieces to start off the roster with. So Mason Graham, while again we wouldn't bat an eye if New England went that direction, I just think offensive line is a bigger hole because every position can be upgraded. But Jacksonville thing I wrote down was kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They suck on the back end, and they really need somebody to complement Brian Thomas because he had a record-setting rookie season as a wide receiver. But I wouldn't expect Christian Kirk after back-to-back season-ending injuries to stay there. Evan Ingram's getting up there in age, so they need a complement and to help Trevor some way, shape, or form, because Jacksonville has failed to do so far. So Travis Hunter kind of fits that mold on both sides. Mason Graham, Raiders going best player available. They're a team that's kind of frisky and risky because they typically haven't done that in the past, but obviously that would be a home run if you were able to land Mason Graham.
Another thing, and I've seen Mason Graham go to 11, so I don't know. Some people are just, I don't know, all over the place. No way, though. But One thing I do want to say about Jacksonville, 25th overall offense, total yards wise, 31st overall defense. So obviously, like you said, two birds with one stone. Travis Hunter makes a lot of sense. I did want to say the Raiders the defensive line wise, if you just look at who will be their defensive line if this happens, it would be Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Mason Graham, and Tyree Wilson, who was the first overall pick for them in the 2023 draft. They had 38 sacks last year, which was 22nd overall. And that defensive line is too good to only have 38 sacks. So with Mason Graham, best player available, and I'm thinking they might go, the expected free agency route with quarterback. They might instead. This could be a Jackson Dart pick. But 4 out of 8 of their 2 deep are unrestricted free agents at the defensive line, so they have to get some people in there.
And with how loaded the AFC West is, I think to even be competitive on a weekly basis, you need to be the best or rival being the best in one area.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while it's been the offensive line, but now it's kind of, I think it was a little bit of a down year, but also it could be because quarterback play was bad, play was non-existent, so that could have a little bit of an effect on it. But at the same time, like putting that Mason Graham on that line instantly gives you the best front four in that division.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden on a weekly basis, okay, Raiders are, overachieving a little bit, but it's not like you didn't see it coming or there wasn't just any way fathomable that they could make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Going over
with Travis Hunter. How much do you all see him, at Colorado, who's playing just about every single play, offense and defense? What kind of percentages do you all see him actually running out there now as he moves to the NFL?
Offensively, like, if he plays defense, he'll be basically like 90 plus. If he's like premier defense. On offense, though, going in, I think he could be like a 40%er to start his career and then build from there, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to automatically just inherit 70% and play all defense, though.
Sure. Role I would put him in is, like you said, putting 90% of the snaps on defense. And basically every time you're running a 2-minute or hurry-up offense, he's on the field as 1, 3, or 4 wide receivers on the field.
Yeah.
Because he instantly becomes your second or third best playmaker on offense. So it would be kind of asinine for Liam Cohen to come in here with the success that he has, spreading the ball around with, Mike Evans over the last couple of years, to just all of a sudden just want to keep in irrelevant wide receivers that is just like, man, put him in on offensive or plays that you just got to move the chains. You got to have quick, big plays. That's the role I think he should play. And I think it would serve him best to do that instead of trying to exceed 80% on both sides.
Right,
because I think that'll really kind of limit his productivity.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Let's go over. So this one, me and Cam went back and forth on. The Jets are a team that, honestly, it's kind of difficult because we are also trying to play in the ear of like what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Micah Williams is not our next edge on the board. But we've seen a lot of people talk about him as being, traits, based on traits, he could be this high. I can't get over the 11% pass rush win rate, but I've seen him mocked here multiple times, and he has those traits. So we're trying to read the tea leaves a little bit with this one. Michael Williams from Georgia going to the Jets. They not necessarily they need to either address edge rusher. To me, offensively, they could go O-line, but there's not really if you wanted to push that, there's just some things that they can address. But I think Michael was our most confident, comfortable thing. The Jets are actually one of the harder teams to mock for, in my personal opinion.
It is really hard because it's not like there's just oh, you have a need there. It's like a significant need. Both tackle spots are pending free agents. 4 of the 5 starting DBs are free agents. They're releasing Aaron Rodgers. Hassan Reddick, which was a disastrous trade, he's obviously moving on. So, which I know he wasn't much with the team or producing with them, but still, you got to replace what you tried to do, losing Huff to New England. To Philly. So they have a lot of areas they could address. I wouldn't be shocked at any of those positions that they went. But it's not like they have a ton of money to just address all of those needs, to just filter down, oh, they did everything but hit corner. Yeah. Or they did everything but do edge or something like that. So I think we're going to go into the draft where they're going to be the true wild card because of the fact that I could see any kind of direction, trade up, trade down, pick best player available. They need a lot on that team. It's a complete overhaul with what they're doing since Aaron Glenn is now at the helm. So, it's a tough one, but it's just BPA based on what we're seeing other people do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why he's here. But I have my own reservations. Go ahead, Dustin.
No, I was actually just going to say I'd love to hear yours because as we've spoken over these over the last couple weeks, you've been plenty verbal with your feelings on Michael Williams and how highly ranked you've seen other people put him at.
I mean, there's a bunch of guys that I'm much lower on. Shamar, we talked about. We'll
At
get into
length.
a bunch of at length. We've talked about him at length, but no, we'll get into a bunch of guys where I'm just like I don't see it, and there's other
Yeah.
guys that I like more that maybe got injured. All the cornerbacks got injured, so we'll talk
Sure.
about all those guys and get into it. Let's go over to the next one. It's our last one of the top 8 that we started with. It's Tedero McMillan, number 1 overall
T-Mac.
wide receiver. Yeah, absolutely. Absolute stud when it comes to just contested catches. He actually has some burst, but he is a contested catch, monster. He has some issues with separating, and I don't know that he's an alpha wide receiver in the way that like we're gonna be like, oh, this guy. Like if we talk about ranking versus last year's class, well, that class was so good at wide receiver. Well, does Tedoroa make it into the top 4 above of Brian Thomas? I don't know because we had Brian Thomas at 14 and we were super high on him. So we're going to talk about wide receiver rankings later, but just kind of putting that out there for everybody that's like, oh, this is a top 5 player. Well, there's a really big difference between this year's top 5 player at wide receiver versus last year's top 5 player at wide receiver. So
Right, and I had an interesting conversation with you off air about the ceiling of Tedoroa because a lot of people are high on him. A lot of people put him to New England because you obviously have a need there. But this is actually realistically the first spot that I think he could come off the board as of now. Carolina just needs weapons for Bryce Young. Jonathan Brooks going to miss the entire season due to another ACL injury on the same knee. Xavier Legette really struggled. Was one of the worst rookie wide receivers. He graded out 90th out of 98 qualified receivers according to PFF.
Jalen Coker was better.
Jalen Coker was better, but at the same time, I don't think that'll get the job.
Oh, no.
Tommy Tremble also a free agent. We do like Jatavion Sanders, but he does have to make a significant leap. But really, you can't just have only old Adam Thielen being the guy for Bryce Young. And so you need somebody to come in. Obviously, T. Higgins is likely to get tagged now, so that really takes a hit on the wide receiver market for receivers coming in their prime because he was the only guy that was about to come in and get a pretty penny to actually possibly be a wide receiver 1. But with Tedoroa, I'm just wondering about his ceiling and if it's as high as other people make it out to be.
I think his floor is awesome. I'm more comfortable with the floor than I am the ceiling. But one thing I want to state about the Carolina Panthers: 29th offensively, 32nd defensively. I think if Tedoroa is gone off the board, they're going defense no matter what to me. So that's kind of like, because I don't think there's another wide receiver they're going to be picking at 8, obviously. So just to put that into perspective. And then also I just want to mention that this is one of the youngest offensive cores in football. Give them time. And that's just something I want to mention, But going on, do you have anything, Dustin?
No, I mean, I've voiced how much I love T-Mac. I think he's a great pickup, and I love him for Bryce Young. So I'm excited to see how Bryce Young does with him. I'm very excited for our next one.
Well, and I actually have something written down that we're going to keep everybody's going to help us stay accountable for. But this is the next 8. The hardest player, and I won't read them all. Let y'all check them out if you can stop the video if you want to. But we'll go on. The hardest player to figure out is Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty was the dark horse. I actually put it up there because he was that's an accolade, absolute accolade. But first team All-American, Maxwell Award winner, second in the Heisman voting. He has 36 15-plus runs. He just absolute 7. I mean, the 5.25 yards after contact thing is just an insane number to wrap my head around. But the problem with Ashton Jeanty is running back is a position that lacks need. Its positional value is not very high. But where and how do we place him when there are teams that need running back, but they also need, I could have said edge for the Saints. I could have said, wide receiver, but that's not one here. But you know what I mean? So Ashton was actually one of the hardest ones to talk about. Kamara is 29, and there's no backups are just shaky, in my personal opinion. The other thing is Cam and I are going to made a bet. So hold us accountable, and I want everybody to go in the comments and tell us how you feel about this.
And what we should bet on, because we didn't really have a wager per se.
Well, we did. We sort of. I mean, you said that you believed he will go in the top 10.
Yep.
So that's where we're going to put the line, 10.5. Okay. So if you believe that Ashton Jeanty is going to go in the top 10, I want you to go in the chat and tell us. And if you think he's going to go past the top 10, you let us know. I actually believe that he's probably going to go after 10. That's just my personal thoughts because I am not a believer in drafting running backs early, but I love this player. It's not that I'm downing this player.
At the end of the day, this is really where when we were doing text back and forth in our group chat trying to put together this mock, where we hit a wall.
Oh, yeah.
And we were arguing a little bit just because, to me, I think it's just with the success and resurgence of the run game this past year, all the free agent running backs that were invested in were a success for the most part. And you really had a lot of success. Recent running backs that were drafted high, and it's just like, oh, I don't know about Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. Banger of a pick. He was running back 1 in fantasy. Bijan Robinson, obviously, really turned it on, was one of the best running backs in football in the second half of the season. Derrick Henry and Saquon breaking the all-time scrimmage yards record, regular season and postseason. I think there's going to be somewhat of a revolution. This is the best running back class
ever.
Maybe ever, but
I'm
at least a decade.
ever.
I'm at least going to date it all the way back to 2017, where you had Kamara and Joe Mixon, all these guys.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know right now, Kamara, he's on the roster. They wouldn't gain anything by cutting him because he is going to turn 30. He's never had 1,000 yards in a season. He's starting to get a little injury prone. And on top of that, Taysom Hill is going to be cut. He is one of the one guy with this team who is dead last in cap space that they can actually not really have a ton of dead money by cutting him. And also, he had a significant knee injury to end the season. So they just have no run game. And Kellen Moore just came leading we're one of the top 3 teams in rushing. So I expect them to just like, hey, we have a lot of holes, but just best player available. Let's just kind of get some people excited through this shit show. Because the next couple of years are going to be tough. But I kind of view this similar to like, we don't have a lot going for us. So let's make people excited to watch. And even if they are 5-12, you have somebody like Ashton Jeanty running for 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. It's at least going to have people have eyes on you, and I think that's kind of the direction New Orleans is trying to go.
No, I completely understand, just the excitement. I mean, obviously, we've talked about him. He was our prospect spotlight, all the things. Go ahead.
And then one thing I did want to point out, I came across this when, writing notes down. Mark Ingram had like a interview, and he made the comment something along the lines of, hey, we should really invest in Ashton Jeanty because blah, 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 blah. I didn't even watch the clip, but Ashton Jeanty liked it.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
There it is.
At the end of the day, with our wager that we put on, the over under 10.5 in terms of top 10 pick, I have no confidence that it's going to be New Orleans. But at the same time, I feel really strong about any of these teams between even 4 to New England, all the way to 10, saying, hey, other than I guess Carolina because they just extended Chuba and they just drafted RB1 last year in Jonathan Brooks, I don't think that they would draft another running back in the top 10, but who knows? All these guys really have a need at the position. So if in a down class that is one of the best classes ever, one of the better seasons we've seen in recent memories as a college running back,
best player
I wouldn't be shocked if any of these teams picked him. I could not land him to any team. I just know he's not going to go to Dallas. That is the only thing I'll say. And that's where everybody's putting him right now.
That's fair. Go ahead, Dustin. What were you saying?
Oh, no, I was just going to say he would go number 1 overall if it was me, but that's okay.
Well, we're going to go to the next guy. Next couple of guys. Actually, we're going to compare some guys. At 10, we have the Chicago Bears taking Kelvin Banks Jr. And then Miami is going to take Armand Membu from Missouri. This is actually a very interesting grouping because all 3 of the interior offensive linemen are for unrestricted free agents for Chicago. And then when you got Membu, you have 2 unrestricted free agents at both guard positions. I actually think Kelvin Banks could be a really, really good guard and then replace at tackle. Or, maybe they're ready to move away because it's a new regime. They could be like, hey, we don't want Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones has been just okay. Let's put someone in there that's better to play our left tackle spot, and that could be Kelvin Banks. So I think there's a lot of options with Kelvin Banks as a player, but they have to get better because they gave up the most sacks at 68 freaking sacks last year of any team. So they have to get better.
Yeah, and part of that was there was a lot of sore eye moments with Caleb Williams. Just like do something. Like there was one specifically Minnesota where they were down 2 possessions in under a minute. They scored a touchdown, got the onside kick, went to overtime. They got the ball first, and there was like a 3rd and 10, and he just stood. He had all the time, and then he got sacked. That goes on the offensive lineman, but it wasn't. That's not saying that they weren't, had a huge fault in the lack of success this year. But either way, I think Chicago is pretty safe to say offensive line is the target here. My question is just, Kelvin Banks, I don't really know what to do with him because kind of similar to what you said about Will Campbell being better inside. We also view Kelvin Banks the same way, where obviously he played a lot at left tackle for Texas and has a lot of starts doing it. So it's not like he has a lack of experience, but it's just short arms. There's just
he's a really, really good I love his pass grade 89.8 and all that stuff, but I think he's actually a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. And I think that he could fit just moving inside and being, like I said, it's so like if you put someone at guard and they have those bookends and they don't have to worry about certain pass rushers and stuff like that, they have opportunities to be all pro type of players. And I think Kelvin Banks has that opportunity. Membu, I've seen a ton of people putting him inside. I actually think he's more of a tackle than Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, just because he's got the long arms. He's only 6'3", and that's a little weird. But Will Campbell's 6'6", but he's got longer arms. I think overall, he is the most pro-ready offensive lineman, other than probably Will Campbell in this class in Membu. And I do want to add this. This is something that's weird, but he plays the right side of the offensive line. Tua is a left-hander. I think it would make sense, obviously, to get a right guard and then possibly right tackle, because I don't know that I think Austin Jackson is just the guy that has to be at that spot, even knowing they took him at 18 a few years back, and I didn't love that pick originally. He's done a little bit better than I actually expected, but I think Membu is pro-ready at guard or tackle right now.
Right, and I think that's a good point on bringing up too, and just like the emphasis on the right side instead of the left side, because it's so baked into our brains. Just we have to protect the blind side of the quarterback, but
it's the other side, yeah.
So, but I sent this to you this morning, and I just wanted to reflect it real quick because I thought it was a really interesting stat. Membu this year obviously played in the SEC, best conference for pass. There's a ton of pass rushers.
So did Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, he did too. But there's a lot of edge rushers that Kelvin Banks didn't play compared to Membu, and versus Jalen Walker, Mikael Williams, James Pierce, Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton, Jack Sawyer, all these guys that he played, which were tough matchups, tough opponents, all these guys could be called on day one, and he only had a 2.7% pressure rate. So I thought that was really impressive that there wasn't really one specific guy or even a couple that really kind of took advantage of him, and all the best pass rushers typically line up against the right tackle. Yeah, exactly. So he got experience against the best, and he really showed out. So he's kind of an unknown, not an unknown name, but one of the, everybody has, Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell atop the offensive line priorities. He's one that's kind of really rising, and somebody that we actually might end up sneaking above one or the other once we do our final rankings.
When we talk about tackle class, Membu's going to be a tackle that it will be pretty high. When we talk about interior offensive line class, he won't be as high as some of the other guys because I think he's actually a better tackle. But we'll talk about that later, of course, and it's going to be a fun conversation. Going to the next little slide, we got a couple cornerbacks, and everybody forgets what Will Johnson was capable of doing. I've seen him ranked behind multiple times behind Jahdae Barron. But Will Johnson plays the position how the NFL wants you to play corner. If you look at the grades, of course, these are actually the 2023 grades for Will Johnson. He had a shortened year this year, so I put the 2023 grades up there, where he was obviously a lockdown corner, both of them with a touchdown interception ratio of 0 to 4, 0 to 5. And then the zone grade for Jahdae. Jahdae is the best zone cornerback in this class, but Will Johnson is the best man-to-man cornerback in this class. And the NFL loves man-to-man quarterbacks, so we can't overlook that type of stuff, in my personal opinion.
Right, yeah. I mean, obviously, Will Johnson, he was one of the star players on their national championship team. And I think we shouldn't have selective bias on just, he had a down year because of an injury or because Michigan as a whole just took a step back this year. Again, like you said, only played 6 games, but he did have 2 pick sixes, including one of them, which was a game sealer / winner against a team that at the time, it's like they don't deserve to be in this game. I think they were 3 touchdown favorites, and they were driving to score to take the lead. So San Francisco, 4 DBs, unrestricted free agents this year. They have a need. They really kind of got exposed in the back half of the season on the back end. When we were playing DFS, we were targeting pass catchers and quarterbacks against the team. And I think Will Johnson fixed that in a long way. And I don't think he deserves to fall out of the top 10, but if he does, San Francisco should just immediately turn the card.
Travarius Ward is going to need a replacement because he will not be back. And so the other position that made a lot of sense for them was offensive tackle because we don't know what Trent Williams is going to do, and their other Colton McKivitz, we don't know
It's okay.
if we think he can actually stay at that position and be a long-term option. On the other side for Indy, I think Jahdae Barron just really fits their defense, and that's why he made the most sense here. It's because like they run the style of defense that he needs to be in. He is a versatile player. He played safety more than he's actually played cornerback in his career at Texas. So he can kind of make a lot of things work in the nickel, in the random free times that he has to go play free, and then also at corner. And he is a long-armed, could learn to be a man press corner. It's just right now he's not that. So off man makes a lot more sense for him. Things like that. Colts love to do that stuff. And they really protect their corners by playing 7 in the box, 8 in the box all the time.
Right.
So,
And a lot of people are pegging Tyler Warren here
Mhm.
to Indy. And I don't think he'll be here at 14.
well,
I truly don't
he's
think-
gone if you
Yeah.
if you saw
Yeah,
earlier.
we'll talk about it in
Yeah.
a second. But one, I don't think he'll even be there at 14. But two, you have so many needs on the defensive side. You
Yeah.
were bad. You were bottom 10 against both the run and the pass. On top of that, DeForest Buckner's getting up there in age. He might be a cap casualty. You don't really have any kind of mainstays on that defense that really will be, franchise or
Right.
cornerstones. And you really need to fix that in some way, shape, or form. And then skill group position, I know what we said about Bryce Young, you need to put skill players around because you have nothing really
Yeah.
for the most part. You got 4 deep at receiver for Indy. And A.D. Mitchell, who was their 4th best receiver. And you've got Josh Downs, and you've got Alec Pierce, who goes all of a sudden for 150 yards every
Yeah.
other game. And then Michael Pittman Jr., who they just extended. Jonathan Taylor showed why he's the top 5 running back at the end. He was a league winner if you play fantasy football. So they have all the weapons. So putting in a tight end who is one of the better prospects we've seen, that would be an upgrade at that position. But it's not like that's not really a priority to me.
Fair.
So Indy, like you said, Jahdae Barron, it kind of fits what they want to do, and they do have a need because cornerback was really a sore spot this year.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dustin.
I was just gonna say I wish we got to see more of Will Johnson, but yeah, Jahdae Barron's an athletic freak. Watching
Oh, yeah.
him out there, so
Corner for the most part is really, really hard this year because basically all the top corners
Got hurt.
got hurt except
Yeah.
for Jahdae
Yep.
Barron, who really rose his stock because he's probably a late day 2 pick, early day 3, all of a sudden vaulted into
Yeah.
fringe round 1 consideration. It's really tough to rank corners, and
We've
we'll
had
reflect that.
conversations.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
not
reflect that
easy.
when we do our cornerback rankings because it might be the most volatile one from our first look to our last look because a lot of things can change because all of a sudden you have 3 different guys that might not participate at all in the combine,
Mhm.
and then all these athletic guys that could all of a sudden
Well,
run 4.3s
yeah,
or
yeah,
be
yeah.
6'3" and awesome. And
we have another corner that we'll talk about in a minute, in the next range, and he is a guy that I see climbing because of the fact that all the other corners are not going to participate, and
Exactly.
he's going to. So we'll get to that. Tyler Warren to the Dallas Cowboys, and Cam.
yeah,
Is it going to be excited about this? I don't actually think the Cowboys will do the right thing, but let's talk about a real upgrade, right?
once again, everybody's pegging Ashton Jeanty here.
Yeah, no way.
Obviously a running back need, but kind of similar to what I said about Indy. One, I don't think he'll be there, and two, there's nothing that they've done already and going into the offseason that they will do before the draft that'll make it seem like, oh yeah, they're gonna go and do the sexy pick that everybody wants.
Yeah.
They're gonna do the boring pick, and we almost put Mimbu here.
Yeah.
But I ended up convincing you to put Tyler Warren. Kind of a root for pick. Last year, you went with you were able to get Brock Bowers out of nowhere, and you're lucky enough to be able to root for him. Well, I want my Brock Bowers, so Tyler Warren is the way to go. This year, Ferguson and Schoonmaker were awful. They not only obviously Ferguson dealt with a couple of injuries here and there, but he just was not good at all. Both of them finished 48th and 56th respectively overall in terms of PFF out of 74 qualified tight ends. They were all below average pass catchers and extremely below average run blockers. Dallas, what they like to do is run the football. And so investing in tight ends that are able to do both or being an exciting tight end, I just think is one of the bigger priorities for Dallas. I've seen people put, when he's on the board, putting like Matthew Golden or Luther Burden here.
No
And
way.
it's just like, that doesn't make sense at all based on what they to improve the team in any way. I think Tyler Warren can instantly become an impact player and be a top 6'7" tight end in football from day one. This is a wishful thinking pick. I don't even know if he'll even do that, even be here to be picked in regardless. But tight end is a sore need for the position, and they really messed up 2 seasons ago when they did go Schoonmaker. I was really kind of I went with I think my final mock I put Michael Mayer there, based on being a early second round pick has not panned out, and obviously they drafted another tight end. I'll take them back if you want.
No.
You want to sell low on him, but
no.
yeah, it's a position that needs to be addressed, and I went with best player available. I kind of twisted your hand here a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love this pick actually. I mean, I just don't know. The only other position that I really think could have been, talked about was interior defensive line.
Yes.
I think Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant. You could have picked either of those guys, and I would have been like, okay, good job. So, but if we talk about best player available is Tyler Warren. If he's on the board at this point, he is the best player available. So I completely agree with this pick. Go ahead, Dustin.
With Brock Bowers having his huge success this year, and obviously, breaking records as a tight end, do we think there's going to be almost this recency bias of trying to find that diamond in the rough tight end moving forward, or is Tyler Warren that good, in your opinion, to be worth the 12th pick?
There's always recency bias. I think that Tyler Warren's very good. I don't think he's Brock Bowers, obviously. But I think that Tyler Warren offers an offense some amazing things. So I think with this pick, getting him at 12th, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the fit I like a lot. I think it reminds me of he kind of reminds me of Dallas Clark in that way. So I think that he makes a lot of sense for this spot. And
sure.
Yeah, I think recency bias is always going to be a thing, but I don't think it's going to actually affect, because I think he is a prospect good enough for this reason.
Right. Yeah. And there's no chance, whether or not Dallas takes him, that he does fall in the back half of the first round, let alone out of the first. When he is selected as a first rounder, he'll be the first tight end in history to be a first round pick and have a 1,000-yard season in college.
Yeah. There you go. That's a cool stat.
Fun fact of the day.
Yeah, let's go over to the next couple. Dustin, you're on the board right here, and
I'm disappointed, but that's fine. Whatever.
I had to put this graphic up because we talk about guys that I'm not as high on. Well, how about Jalen Walker? He's not even, and I think he's a linebacker personally. He's not even my number one linebacker on our board right now, so we're gonna have to just figure that out. But he does offer some things as just a automatic floor, ready to play strength-wise player, where when he comes in day one, he's going to give you a lot more than some of these other guys that are going to have to develop. So I think for your defense, Dustin, I think he fits really well because he can play outside linebacker, inside linebacker, rush, do all these things. But I don't know that I think he is a bona fide top 10 guy like we see on, I believe Mel Kiper and DJ both have him at 8 or something like that. Yeah. I don't see him that way. I think he's much farther back because I think that there's limitations, and I don't think he's Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter style where he can move down and just play edge rusher and that type of stuff. I think he's a true linebacker. So that's,
and on top of that, sorry to cut you off, Dusty, but
no, you're fine.
They've also really tried to address this kind of hybrid dual threat.
Yeah, Zaven
Collins, Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dusty, but neither did pan out.
At least
Zaven had an okay season. But at the end of the day, their leading sacker on the team this year had 5 sacks.
Yep.
So they need to improve that in some way, shape, or form. It's not like all of that is going to come from somebody like Jalen Walker. But one question I did have for Dusty, since it is his team, and then we'll jump over to Atlanta for a second. There are a couple of pass rushers from your alma mater and your favorite team, the Texas A&M Aggies.
Yeah.
Trying your best to put recency bias, or not recency bias, but favoritism aside, do you think either of them warrant being here? And if so, which one would you prefer ahead of Jalen Walker if you believe that?
The answer is not Shamar. Let's just start there.
Good answer.
Anything, it would
great answer.
If anything, it'd be Nick Gordon. Now, if you saw us kind of talk about our Senior Bowl videos and whatnot, we talked about how Nick was by far the best defensive lineman on the team, but also still underperformed compared to what was kind of expected of him. And, part of that being on the team too. I'm truly not recency bias or with or without it. At the beginning of the college year, with what Nick Gordon looked like he was going to be, I probably would have said, put Nick Gordon up here. Why is he not up here even higher? But with how I saw it, he didn't give me enough to want to change it. So I don't mind having Jalen Walker above them and definitely above Shamar.
I think also we're projecting, so we're
Yeah.
trying to expect what teams are going to do and what other draft analysts that have more insight than we do, maybe because we don't get we don't get a text from the GM of the Arizona
day.
Cardinals. Maybe one day, yeah, but so that's
Friendship.
another thing. I don't think Nick Scorton is as highly touted by NFL GMs right now,
Yeah.
even knowing we might have him a little bit higher. Foreshadowing than other people. And I think Shamar obviously is because of his performance at the Senior Bowl, even knowing he had 4.5 sacks through his 3 years in college. But how about another guy that just took over the Senior Bowl, Mike Green on the other side over here?
Listening to
Production, yes, 17
Yep.
sacks, had the most sacks. He's a second-team All-American, absolutely deserving of that.
Yep.
Coming out of Marshall, yeah, you can be like, oh, well, he played for Marshall, and Jalen Walker played for Georgia. It doesn't matter. Production is production everywhere. Does not matter, I promise. If you look, 20.1% pass rush win rate, gets it done on the in the pass rush and on stopping the run. So he's a guy that I really like. Atlanta has to go edge, in my personal opinion. 3 out of 4 of their edges are unrestricted free agents. They had 31 total sacks, which was 31st out of 32. Not very good. So I think that this pick makes a lot of sense for that reason too.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. Kind of similar to Arizona, leading sacker was about 6.5, and I think you went a couple down before you even got to an edge rusher, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, they have some needs kind of in multiple spots, but at the same time, I think it's just kind of
Best player available.
best player available.
It's
And
Mike
Just-
Green.
at the end of the day, it's Mike Green. We worried about his hands and his arms, but he was one of the biggest winners of Senior Bowl week.
Yeah.
Had a lot of highlights and just burying people into the dirt. Yeah, he's one of the most exciting players to watch. And damn the size or the combine attributes and stuff like that. I want people that are going to get to the quarterback and win, and I think he fits that mold.
Just to
Oh, no.
put a cherry on this slide, you already mentioned how, I'm a Cardinals fan. That's great and all. Did you really have to create a graphic where the guy going to Arizona and lost every category you listed?
Absolutely. That was
Thank
that
you.
was the perfect thing to do. It actually drives home the point of Jalen Walker. Are we really putting him in the light of a top 8 player?
Absolutely.
And that
Because
because
some
of look
people
at
even have
this.
him as a top, first half of the first round.
I've seen him
Obviously,
go to
this is right
Carolina a lot.
Exactly.
So
and so yeah, and again, if we do a what would we do mock as this very moment, he's going to be much lower than this. But at the same time, we'll see how things work out. I don't know how soon we're going to do our first what would we do, but it would probably be post combine.
Yeah, post combine.
And then it'll just kind of see who stood out and who rose and who fell from there.
For sure. Going over to the next ranking list, 17 through 24. We're gonna have a lot. We have a lot to talk about here because there's some guys that I think are much higher on our board versus what the current mock drafts in NFL are thinking, or at least the high-level analyst at CBS and NFL and all those places, ESPN. So there they are, top 17 through 24. Let's go on though. Oh man, Walter Nolan, man. I love Walter Nolan.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was
Man.
one of my favorite
I love Walter Nolan.
team to player
Oh, yeah,
selections
yeah,
of
for
the
sure.
first round.
Yep.
Obviously, Cincinnati, their biggest weakness on defense was stopping run when it mattered. Defensive interior, they made a terrible decision last year in letting DJ Reader walk and then signing Sheldon Rankins to the same exact salary, and obviously that did not pan out like we said it wouldn't last offseason. But also they have other free agents that are coming
BJ
as
Hill.
well. BJ Hill was their main interior lineman. So they just kind of got to get young and strong in the middle. And he's, to me, one of our favorite prospects based on value where he's currently going.
Freak.
There's people putting him at the end of the first round right now. And we're just like, hey, honestly, you at 12, you should really think about that, Dallas.
Absolutely.
Like that's how we view him right now. And
I still can't believe he's this low.
yeah,
well,
it just kind of had the board fell. And on top of that, like we mentioned, Jackson Dart, his teammate, who knows if he'll be at the back half of this first round, but I truly do think as of this moment that he is going to be in some way, shape, or form a first round pick. I don't know if that means he'll be drafted ahead of Walter Nolan, but if he is drafted higher than expected, guys like Walter Nolan will fall a spot lower, and maybe instead of getting Jalen Walker, you might end up with a Mike Green, Dusty, because of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and then on
I'll
the other
take
side,
that.
oh well, yeah, I bet you would. On the other side, the Kenneth Grant, he's a match made for this pick because the Los Angeles Chargers, of course, Jim Harbaugh is an ex-Michigan coach. The DC is his ex-coach, and I will tell you, Kenneth Grant has been talked very highly by Harbaugh. Harbaugh said, and this is quoted, Grant may be the best of them. And he's talking about all the defensive players that have come out of Michigan. So if Kenneth Grant lives up to that, 22 is a absolute steal, obviously.
Yeah.
Kenneth Grant has been very, very good this year, but he is outshined, of course, by Mason Graham standing next to him because Mason Graham is just an absolute stud. But Kenneth Grant is a much bigger prospect, will play the interior. And if you look at, the Chargers, they run a 3-4. They run 4 eyes. They run 3 techniques. And their right end and left end, right end had a 41.5 grade, and their left end had a 51.3.1 grade overall. This is an absolute improvement no matter what, wherever they put him. And so I'm very excited if this does happen because I think it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, one of the lazy things I think a lot of mock drafters are doing is just like insert Michigan player to
Right.
Harbaugh.
No, I
like
get
that,
it.
Yeah.
That's what they did last year when Blake Corum was a second round pick. Everybody, if you watched the mock draft, put Blake Corum to the Chargers. And obviously
Yeah.
they did have a need, but then guess who else they put into the game more so than he probably deserved to? Hassan Haskins, another Michigan player.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to put Colston Loveland to the Chargers. And
Yeah, why not?
it's like, I guess, sure, but this one kind of organically made sense based on what they need.
Mhm.
They are losing, a decent amount in the front 7. And like you said, he was kind of like, not an unsung hero, but just kind of overlooked at occasion because of all the star-studded Michigan defenders that
Josiah
there were
Stewart
the last 2
with
years.
his like 27% pass rush win rate. Like all
Yeah.
of the D line is really good for them. So
Exactly.
like it's
So,
just
yeah, I mean, I like the pick a lot. Couldn't really fault them going in a lot of directions, but, they really kind of got exposed in the wild card round.
mhm.
And so kind of doing an instant impact player is something that I think they should target.
And before Harbaugh got there, they couldn't stop the run. So he's gonna have to figure out how to stop the run. Dustin, I know that you're a big Walter Nolan fan, but I have seen
Oh, yeah.
some rankings with Kenneth Grant above him, just so that you know. I think it's an absolute travesty.
I mean, aside from Ashton Jeanty, who should be above Walter Nolan here? So,
Okay. All right, we're going to the next one. A guy I think Seattle gets an absolute steal here. Because Josh Simmons is one of my favorite players in this class. He was our GTD preseason dark horse. It didn't change. I've seen so many comps to another guy that I loved in Christian Darrisaw. And Christian Darrisaw, Josh Simmons, I have a type when it comes to offensive tackle. And it's freak athlete. It's just freak athlete, man. This guy can move like a tight end, but at his size, it's just very special. And he can play left side. And he can play the right side. And I know that we're going to talk about certain guys that can't do that, but he has actually played right tackle 799 snaps at right tackle his sophomore year. And they already have Charles Cross at left tackle. So if they want to put him on the right side, he is an upgrade right now over Abe Lucas all day long. So getting this guy in the building is the trick. He to me should go higher, but he had the injury that he tore his ACL against Oregon, and so that of course messes things up. But 54 sacks given up by the Seattle Seahawks this last year. I think this fixes it right here, or helps fix it at least.
Definitely. I mean, Josh Simmons is one of the tougher ones because he just has a wide range of outcomes in terms of where you can slot him.
Right.
Because we wouldn't be shocked if somebody at the back end of the top 10 selected him, but also there's a lot of mocks putting him at the back end of the first round.
Yeah.
So we kind of put him smack dab in the middle against the team that was ranked 31st offensive line wise, and they were dead last in pass blocking efficiency at a 34.8% pressure rate, which is insane, and that led to the second most sacks in football allowed as well. He's one of our favorite tackles, and he just is not really getting enough buzz right now. And I know the injury might make him kind of slide a little bit further than it's warranted, but I mean, like you said, one of the favorite steals when we do our reviews of the first round and our favorite picks and stuff like that, he's going to be on all those lists, especially if he goes in a range like this.
Oh yeah, if he goes at 18, whoever gets him. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if the Cardinals took him, like things like that. Over Jalen Walker. No, I mean, honestly, Jalen Walker will be ranked higher on everybody's board, but I think Josh Simmons we're going to talk about him as one of the guys that deserves more love. He had the best tape of any player coming into
Yeah. I mean, he's
an
6'5", 310.
prior to he had the best tape prior to him getting injured, which
Yeah.
everybody wants to make the case that he didn't play anybody. So whatever, make that case all you want. He was good last year too.
Yeah.
But going on to the next guys, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking edge rusher James Pierce Jr., first team All SEC. I hate what Tennessee does. They rotate every 3 plays, and they have like 9 deep, so he never played. But 22.7% pass rush win rate. Should have been on the field more, obviously. Absolute stud. And then Colston Loveland, I think Denver, we kind of went back and forth on how to view Denver because they have some holes, but they don't really have holes. So Colston Loveland is the biggest impact changer between all of the positions that maybe Denver could have gone with, I guess.
Yeah, real quick on Denver. This was the one somewhat lazy pick that we did, kind of as consensus. A lot of this was kind of against the grain or just formatting in a way that is our own mock. But this one just kind of organically fell into place. No tight end for Denver had more than 190 receiving yards last year.
That was terrible.
And on top of that, all 3 of them, because they did a 3-man weave in terms of Trotman, Atkins, and Lucas Kroll, all of them graded outside the top 35, and all of them had receiving grades below 57. I'm not saying that Sean Payton wants to get back another Jimmy Graham or something of that caliber, but I think he wants a difference maker at that position. And while Bo Nix had a crazy good rookie year, like you said, he statistically in aspects had a better year than Jaden Daniels. And obviously Denver had one of the lowest win totals. Absolutely shocked some people and were in the thick of things till the very end, which was a great, plus and positive for them. They do need help at the skill player position. Running back was atrocious this year. Receiver outside of Cortland Sutton, they just kind of did a weave as well with the next guy, Marvin Mims, or whether it's Troy Franklin or what have you. I don't think any of those guys are bad enough to where it's like I need to draft first rounder right now to upgrade. But tight end, there is that. So Colston Loveland enjoyed that pick, and I think that's a good fit. James Pierce was a preseason top 10 pick. And like you said, because of the way they do things, just kind of fell a little bit because his wasn't as great of a year. But
he didn't have the sack production that some of the other guys might have had because of the fact that he was just not on the field. Right. But when he was on the field running, pass rushes, he was very good. So that's something that, kind of stinks for him and Omar Norman Lott and these other guys that played on the same D line. Yeah. But there's a lot of upside. James Pierce has the most upside of any edge rusher to me.
Right. Yeah, and I actually think it's interesting. I don't know stylistically how much of a similarity it is, but at least the view of him is kind of similar to how Jared Verse was, because he was like a preseason top 10 pick twice.
Yeah.
And obviously he came back after a somewhat down year and then came back, and Florida State was really good. And but because he didn't wow in terms of statistics, he fell all the way to the 19th pick, coincidentally. James Pierce, right, being nabbed up at the 19th pick. And you saw how instantly, even though Jared Verse was a year older than a couple of guys, how instantly of a difference maker he was. And the Rams, who had the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles on the road, on the brink of being upset, he was one of the best players in that entire football game. And that is including a loaded roster that Philly has no weaknesses on. He was one of the ones that stood out the most. And James Pierce kind of has a similar opportunity to do that. Tampa Bay, in their recent Super Bowl runs, obviously a lot of that was Tom Brady, but their biggest strength was the pass rush.
Yeah.
And they kind of need to get back to that, because obviously everybody's kind of aged out. James Pierre-Paul retired. Shaq Barrett moved on, and then obviously
he's
no impact this year.
Yeah.
So your best 4 pass rushers were nose tackle, defensive lineman, and linebacker.
Well, and Tryon, what's his last name? I'm sorry.
He changed it after the draft.
Yeah, so he is now a unrestricted free agent, but he did not pan out. So
Shoryinka,
that's right. Yeah, so he didn't pan out. So I think that getting another edge rusher makes the most sense here.
Basically, linebacker-wise, they have a couple of starters, that Levante David and Anthony Nelson, that are pending free agents. But basically, their entire front 7 in terms of depth are all free agents, like William Golston, Greg Gaines, Joe Tryon, like you mentioned, KJ Britt, Shaquille Barrett, who was signed later on, and then So they need some depth. They need better pass rushing, and so I think that's a way to improve their roster in the immediate future.
Yep. 21.
21.
We had a conversation about this, and I'm not going to put out rankings and tell you all what the wide receiver rankings are, but there's definitely like some argument between obviously who 2 and 3 are in everybody's ranking. If you believe in Luther Burden, who had a down year, Emeka Ibuka, who is probably the most highest floor receiver we've seen in a while. They had similar production, actually, if you like look at it in a game to game basis, but just, Emeka Ibuka fits probably more with the Justin Fields, and that's who we think will be the quarterback of this team. So getting Emeka Ibuka, who is a ready pro ready floor player to go to Pittsburgh, I think it makes sense. I wouldn't have been mad if it was Luther Burden because I'm actually higher on him, and you believe in Emeka Ibuka and you like the floor, and I get it. I completely get it. He's a great player. So.
I can't get away from the sure thing that I feel
Yep.
with the
Yeah.
Mekabuka. He's one of my favorite players in this entire class just because of shining bright in the biggest moments. And when he is basically wide receiver over the last couple of years in terms of top receivers taken in the drafts, he was basically second fiddle to a lot of them and still produced multiple 1,000-yard seasons. And throughout this championship stretch, a lot of times when they needed big plays, he was the one who shone Brodus. And obviously Jeremiah Smith, sensational freshman.
Right.
One of the biggest reasons that they did make it all the way. But you saw in the the semifinal against Texas, he was non-existent. One catch for 4 yards. But Emeka Ibuka was a guy that was moving change a lot early on to make them play from ahead and be able to set themselves up to, play with a lead.
Yeah.
So I like him a lot. The one kind of reservation is that Pittsburgh doesn't really target first-round receivers. I mean, it's been a long time. Santonio Holmes was the last time that they drafted a receiver in the first round. They have a good track record of drafting receivers. And on top of that, George Pickens, kind of a sneaky name that's available on the trade market. But outside of that, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, all those guys are just free agents. And on top of that, did not work out. So they need a secondary playmaker for if it's Justin Fields or if it's Russell Wilson or if it's rookie quarterback. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They need another weapon. And so I just think it's a good fit stylistically. And I think he just feels like a Steeler in terms of how he plays to me.
Okay. I don't know that I can agree with that. Sure. I think that he is a old school Steeler more so than this new school big body type of player.
Right.
Go ahead, Dustin.
I was just going to say, and we had talked about it, but I completely agree. I love the floor on Emeka. He just, like Cam said, he's been right there next to usually the guy, such as Jeremiah Smith this year at Ohio State. I'm excited to see how he produces. I hope they utilize him because I think he can be a big piece, especially in like a Justin Fields offense. So I like him going to the Steelers here.
I think the problem for me is I think he's a amazing number 2. I don't know. He's probably one of the top 5 number 2s in the league, but I don't know that he'll ever be a number 1. And
I mean, he could just change his jersey number.
There are so many good number 2s, and that is what you need nowadays in the NFL. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying if you're going to be picking in the first round as the Steelers and you're going to be getting rid of all of your number 1s, it's really hard. And I can see the Ladd McConkey freaking conversation coming because we all thought he was a number 2, and then he goes and does what he did. So, I mean, there's opportunities, and I really like Emeka Ibuka. I'm not downing him.
And at the end of the day, even if he is a wide receiver too, I think based on today's game and the way that people prioritize the receiver position, I think it is justified to have 2 strong options. I mean, the best receiver in football, almost universally, I really have a soft spot for Jamar Chase, but Justin Jefferson obviously has played his way into being the best. They still drafted a first-round receiver in Jordan Addison, which we were saying in that one, I'm not sure if he's a number 1, but he's thrived as a number 2.
Oh yeah, for
Devontae
sure.
Smith, even though he was a Heisman winner, was drafted to the Eagles, and they still traded for A.J. Brown, and it's been fine and it's worked out. Jalen Waddle, I don't think anybody's really poo-pooing him in any way other than having a couple of injury-plagued seasons.
Yeah.
Being a second fiddle to a Tyreek Hill, which maybe he'll be first fiddle this year. Who knows? But I think it works. And essentially in the back half of the first round, this is the point where it's a lot of these guys are really close to one another. So best player available is really the approach that a lot of people would go. But Pittsburgh, it's just whether or not that they want to target it at this particular moment in the draft.
And then moving over to the next grouping, it's a couple of DBs. So this is a Azaria Thomas. We are projecting that in the combine and everything that he does from here on for his draft stock, he's going to go up. Now, there are other really good cornerbacks. That's what we were saying earlier. Benjamin Morrison, Savon Revo, I'm missing Trey Amos, like these guys, but Maxwell Harrison, most of those guys got injured. And it's really going to be hard if they can't go to the combine and do things to improve their draft stock, obviously. So we saw last year, Cooper DeJean, he had injuries, couldn't do any of the stuff. Guess what? He fell to 40. I think that those same things are going to happen to those other guys. Well, who
That's
has...
absolutely fair.
Yeah, but so there's some guys that are just going to naturally move up. This is one of them, in my personal opinion. And that's why Green Bay has to go corner. They're Jair is asking for the trade. Eric Stokes is one of their ex first rounders. He's just bad. They love drafting upside defense. Rashawn Gary's of the world, upside defense that have really high ceilings. That's what Thomas has. So that's
Right.
why I think he makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, this is a young roster filled with really good, not necessarily great players, but good foundational pieces for a deep roster.
Yeah.
But corner is really, like you said, the sore need. Jair Alexander, whether he's there or not, the other side of the ball, like it's been a real, mainstay. On top of that, Jair has struggled with some injuries in recent years. Eric Stokes, a couple of years they picked in the first round on the back end, did not work out. And on top of that, he's a pending free agent. So yeah, they need to address that position. And with the offensive teams that they have to face, Minnesota,
Yeah.
Detroit, Chicago. I know they had a rough offensive year, but optimistically, having a stronger defense because Ben Johnson, who was OC for Detroit, the highest scoring offense, is now their head coach.
Yeah.
So you're going to have some shootouts possibly in the NFC North. And so I don't think you need to just say, oh, we're going to rely on trying to win 31-30 every single week when you play these tough divisional opponents.
Yep. And then on the other side, Malachi Starks, a guy that is possibly a top 10 player on some boards and possibly a top 35 player on some boards. So very big.
Very polarized.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of issues with the fact that, he just didn't have as many opportunities, but there's a big hole for the Minnesota Vikings. And our friend and podcast buddy, Nick, he is going to love this pick because Malachi Starks being here is insane. It's a do-it-all safety. And they're losing a bunch, or they have a bunch that are in flux because Byron Murphy really played well this year. So he's probably going to get re-signed, but Stephon Gilmore's leaving. Cam Bynum's leaving. And
including their nickel cornerback. The only defensive back that is not a unrestricted free agent is their 36-year-old safety, Harrison
Smith.
So they've really tried to address this position, and they finally did, but they did it in the short term because Byron Murphy, who was a previous, not necessarily a bust, but it didn't work out in his first spot, goes over to Minnesota, has a really strong year. I don't know why you're smiling over there, but sorry, Dustin.
Because he's better than what Arizona did for him.
Right, but like you were saying, Malachi Starks has a wide range of outcomes as well in this draft. On top of that, safety is not a position that you've got to be a Caleb Downs to be top 10 consideration.
For sure.
I don't think he is that, but a lot of people view him as a really strong defensive back. A lot of people I've seen put him at 13 because Miami is missing both safeties, or both are pending free agents. So it does make sense there. But at the same time, I think it is a solid value pick for Minnesota. I will say they won't be here to make this pick when we do trades and stuff like that because they have 3 picks in the entire draft.
Yeah.
This is their only pick before the 5th round.
Yep.
So because they made multiple trades last year to trade up after they traded for J.J. McCarthy. After they selected J.J. McCarthy, they traded up to take a pass rusher as well and then made the Stephon Diggs, all that good stuff. So, they have no draft capital. And they need draft capital, so they're the easiest bet to trade down in any way. But again, we're not doing trades here. And if they were to stay for some reason, I think it's a pretty solid value pick.
Yep. And then go ahead, Dustin. I'll let you chime in on these two guys. I know that you have watched a lot of Malachi Starks over this last couple years.
Yeah. Malachi Starks is really good. Complete guy. There's a reason he's a second-team All-American. I'm excited to see how he progresses forward. I'm sure after the year the Seminoles had, you're glad to see one bright spot here in the first round.
Whatever.
Who's counting?
Well,
We have
it's
two
okay.
bright spots.
On the next slide, we get to see a couple of my guys who let us down, as
Fair.
many Cardinals players have, as y'all continue to comment on.
Well,
It
it's
just coincidentally, falls into
Yeah,
place.
yeah, no,
It's not
it
like
was
we're
just-
trying to. I didn't write down, oh, jab Dusty. It's just like, oh, I can also jab Dusty right now.
hey, don't worry. If you
It's
look
very unfortunate how
You know what's
often
great?
it's
You know what's-
available.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we could always jab the Raiders, and
Or the
you
Cowboys.
come at me sideways, but at the
It's
same
true.
time, none of our players are still in the league. Some of them are in jail, some of them are on the couch, some are delivering Ubers. So, like, it's just
I mean, at
that's
least
where
you have
our
Brock Bowers.
one good. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And it was the least need of any
Yeah,
of the picks
yeah,
that
right.
they had. But it worked out and it was awesome. And
Yeah.
I'm
Marcus,
gonna draft a lot of him for the next 10 years.
Jamarcus
Yeah.
Russell should have played left tackle, okay? And we did that at first overall. So it's just, whatever. Going on. This is the last 8 for us. As you can see, these are the teams that have less needs and have done really well, obviously, because they're this far down. The Texans, we have talked about as one of the teams that might be moving down also. But if Tyler Booker is still on the board, I think it's a really great pick for them. They have to address their offensive line. 54 sacks last year, tied for 30th. Their offensive line, I mean, their right tackle at a 44.7 grade. And that's Titus Howard needs to go back to right tackle. And he's not the option. He's not the best option, but he needs to go at least back to right tackle because it's got to
guard
be.
ain't working.
It's still better.
Yeah.
I think he was fine at guard, but I mean he's better than Blake Fisher right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Any day of the week, and adding a guy like Tyler Booker, who I've seen at 10 to Chicago, all the way at 25,
Yeah.
is a very very big thing. It allows, like I said, to move Howard back to right tackle. Wide receiver was our other option that we were looking at too.
Let me ask you, because I was going to bring that up, how he's been as high as 10 to Chicago. A lot of people have him over Mimbu, and I don't really necessarily understand that. Why do they feel that way at the very moment?
Well, no, I think Tyler Booker is very interesting. I think with my reason with Membu is I'm a positional value scouter too. Like I believe in tackle over guard all day long. Of course, Membu could play guard, but I think if you're just like talking about who should have more value, I think Tyler Booker's a good player. He's not necessarily a Quentin Nelson. He's not Elijah Vera Tucker. He's not any of those guards that you're like, oh, like they can do a lot of things. They're very natural. Like he's just a swole, good leader, downhill runner type of guy, but he does have issues in the pass game. I mean, a 2.5% quarterback pressure percent is not very high, but that's pretty high for an interior offensive lineman in this class. JPJ had a 0.03% last year. So this is a much different thing. And of course, 10 total pressures. He was good, but I think we're overrating him a little bit based on just like consensus where he's going, like on big boards and things like that. I think he's a little bit lower than that. And I also think it's because of the fact that some of these guys are going to play guard and not tackle, and knowing their tackles right now.
Right.
If that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and wide receiver was a strong consideration here too. Obviously Luther Burden was the best guy on the board at the time, and then Tank Dell, significant knee injury. I wouldn't be shocked if he missed the entire season next year. Stephon Diggs, not only is he a free agent, he also tore his ACL, and he's also 30 plus.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they sign him back, but even if they do, you shouldn't expect the same outcome. But they came into the year as one of the strongest and deepest receiving corps, and then all of a sudden, that really kind of thinned out. Because every one of them, including Nico Collins, who hit IR for a few games due to a hamstring, the guys that we had behind him, and it's like, you know what? I like John Mechie. I like Xavier Hutchinson. Did not really grab that opportunity like we would have thought they would if, hey, one guy's available. We just need you to be a 6-target guy. Can you fill that role? And they really did not. A lot of that was CJ Stroud having a rough sophomore year. But all of a sudden that addresses, Tank Dell being out. The deep threat is no longer there, and the Yak guy. So they need somebody. Another thing is an aging Joe Mixon, who had a strong first year with Houston.
Yeah, great year, yeah.
But you can't expect just year over year that you're going to just get 1,500 yards from your running back. So, and he's had a history of missing a couple games a year too. So, they need some explosion offensively. Wouldn't be shocked if they went receiver here, but Tyler Booker makes all of the sense because, like you said, the interior presence was sorely lacking for Houston last year.
I think too and we had a conversation about this the other day, but the wide receiver class is very second, third round heavy.
Yep.
It's not, of course, first round heavy at all. We're gonna get some first rounders just naturally because this is a lower class overall. But if you just look at it, like everybody is getting pushed back, and some of those guys are going to get picked a little bit earlier. And there's some guys that I think they could pick that could be good complements to Nico Collins in the second round, in the third round, and that would be more helpful. But John Mechie should hopefully take over as the number 2. Going over to another Alabama guy. This is a pick that I was like, holy crap! I don't know how he got here in my mind. I was like, Jahad Campbell should be gone. He's the best player available on the board. He is the perfect fit for the Los Angeles Rams, who, I mean, both of their inside linebackers, Roseboom and Reeder, 53.5 and a 57.9 grade on those two guys, both of them unrestricted free agents, and they just love adding young studs to the defense. So, best player available, man, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and right now, the linebacker class is kind of all over the place. Would you say that he's kind of in a tier of his own?
As just a pure linebacker? Well, he actually came, funny enough, he went to Alabama as an edge rusher. And so he has upside as an edge rusher, not like a Jalen Walker or something like that, but he can still rush the passer and move around, and they run a 3-4, so he can line up on that edge spots and stuff like that. I think that he is the best linebacker prospect, though, by I don't know if it's a wide margin, but I really like him. He's a playmaker. I'm sure Dustin watched him a lot at Alabama, watching the SEC a lot.
And like you said, you thought Jalen Walker would be better as a pure linebacker. When you were saying that he's the best linebacker, are you also putting Jalen Walker in that?
Yeah, I actually have Jahad Campbell as a higher prospect.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to bring up. And that doesn't necessarily, even though that's an unpopular opinion per se, it's not like we're extremely reaching. We just think that Jalen Walker's a little lower, and Jahad is just not getting the respect he deserves.
Yeah,
right now.
He's like 22 on most big boards, and we have him in the middle of the teens. And you have 8 for Jalen Walker, and he's in the middle of the teens. So one of them has to go above the other. I think he's a better linebacker. If they're just like, we're gonna purely play Jalen Walker at edge, I'm like, okay, well then he's in the 20s. Just saying, because I don't think he's just so much better than Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams, Jack Sawyer. Like, I think those guys are obviously, also very good at football. So, yeah, I think Jahad Campbell is above him.
Yep.
But, yeah, Dustin, what do you think of Jahad? Because I know you watched some Alabama, and I think you probably saw this game.
He's gross. So just put that out there. B, I'm a big nerd. Analytics. I love analytics, and I love when guys who have to do multiple things can do all of them well. His run grade, his pass rush grade, and coverage grade all being above 70, with 2 of them being above 80, is very satisfying.
The best thing on that whole board is that 5.9% missed tackle rate. I'm a believer in who can tackle. Like, I believe if okay, so there's rankings, obviously. When it comes to linebackers, you should be under 8%. If you're a box safety, it should be under 11%, basically. 13% for real safeties. Deep corners, some of them have 25% missed tackle rates. So I don't know what to do with them half the time. But 5.9 is just absolutely amazing. And he's a guy that, you just want a guy like this on your team. He's a freak athlete. He's all those things. And so, yeah, he's a really good player. Let's go over to a couple tackles. I'm going to let you go first on this one, Cam, because...
Yeah, I mean, with Baltimore, obviously, Ronnie Stanley is a pending free agent. The left side of the line actually is both of them are free agents, and so they're really kind of need some depth there to address it a little bit because it's kind of aged out over time as Lamar's been there. And so it was interesting because, Josh Connerly versus Ursary, I don't know top of my head who's ranked higher, but you made the comment, Ursary, you actually like the fit better
love the fit.
For Baltimore. And I want you to go in a little depth why you feel that way.
Well, he's built like a truck, first off. I mean, he really is. Like, he is 6'6" and just absolutely just solid. He's built to run block is how I kind of just look at him. And we know what Baltimore loves to do. They love to run the ball. And replacing Ronnie Stanley actually was a smaller, like weight-wise tackle when he came into the league. I don't know what he ended up as or what he is now, but I know that he was smaller weight wise when he came into the league. Great run blocker, fine. Ursary adds to that as a player. And I think that replacing Ronnie Stanley, who was a 2016 first rounder, would be really good with a guy that just can run block on a insane level, especially when all Baltimore wants to do is run the ball. So that's kind of my thought process on that. On the other side, Josh Connerly Jr., we all watched the Super Bowl. We all know what happened to this Kansas City team. They have to get a guy that can play left tackle and then also, be able to move Joe back into guard is really what I think would be the best thing. Just trying to get some help everywhere. Re-sign Trey Smith, things like that.
Yeah, and who knows if he will, because he's one of the few offensive linemen overall that is entering after their first contract. So
Yeah.
he is going to be it's going to be a bidding war for his services. It's going to be hard to keep him. Ideally, it's a big win if you could, but huge loss if obviously he departs. But Joe Tooney, 4-time Super Bowl champ, big vet for New England. Left tackle was so bad and unproductive last year that they had to move him out to tackle for late in the season and in the Super Bowl. And so he is a really strong guard and, just kind of felt like he was playing out of position. So I don't necessarily think that they need to move on from him. But obviously DJ Humphries came in as like a vet presence and, didn't pan out there. And then Kingsley Suamataia, who we liked as kind of like a day 2 pick last year, they thrusted him in really early. He started week 1, and he did not work out.
No.
He had a 39.4 overall grade, which was 137th at 141 qualified tackles. So obviously just really, really rough rookie year. Maybe it was just thrown to the fire too soon. Maybe he can work out, but at the same time, it's not like you can just rely on, we're going to give him another shot and it's going to be okay. Last time they lost the Super Bowl, obviously it was the Bucs pass rush we mentioned earlier, and they just kept getting to and that was more so both of them were injured. They had multiple injuries, but you saw instantly as soon as they hit the offseason, bang bang on both sides, hitting in draft picks and investing high funds and high dollar into both positions. So I kind of feel like they will be doing a similar approach this year. They don't have as much cap space as they did at that point, but at the same time, they have a reasonable amount to maybe sign a vet on one side and then on the other side go ahead and pick one of these guys, which, wouldn't be surprised if either were on the board, but both would be helpful in improving the offensive line.
Yeah, actually, I think most boards are going to have Ursary much lower, but based on fit,
Right,
it does not matter.
That was a fit thing, but we also wouldn't be shocked if he ended up rising because of pre-draft workouts.
Yeah,
and
his
combines and
size
stuff.
in general.
Right.
Freak.
6'6", 330. So
Yeah, I think that's nice. His arm length is great.
Yep.
So it's a whole combination of what I think Baltimore wants to do. And then Josh Connerly actually is possibly one of the better, pass blockers in this class, like natural pass blockers. So best footwork and things like that. And then we have Dustin's pair right here. Yeah. Well, I don't understand how we get to the point where Shamar Stewart is considered edge 1 on or edge 2 on people's boards behind a Abdul Carter when you only have 4.5 sacks for 3 years. So I'm
only
not
1.5
going to
last
buy
year.
it. I'm just not. Yeah, 1.5. I'm not going to buy it. I'm really not. And so I know we're putting him at 28. I know that that's where he is. I actually, think that if that happens, that's not a terrible pick because you're a team that has situationally been very good and you have other guys that can play. And you're not picking him at 8 or something like that, and you're, hoping that he turns out to be like the next coming. But me and Shamar are going to have some conversations, is all I'm saying. And then Nick Gordon, replacing Josh Sweat, basically. Philly loves drafting guys that fall to them. He's not from Georgia, unfortunately, but he is a guy that probably shouldn't be here in my own thoughts of like where the big board would be. And he's getting to go to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, who just won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, starting with Detroit, essentially they just kind of ran out of bodies at the last half of the season. Aiden Hutchinson was on pace to become the defensive player of the year. That's how good he was playing.
Oh, yeah.
Once he went down, they were serviceable. They still were a solid defense, but then other depth pieces went down. Marcus Davenport, who they brought in as a 1-year rental,
Meh.
he was lost 2 games into the season. So Zadarius Smith is getting up there in age. Josh Paschal, okay depth piece, but they really need a second edge to really kind of put a bow on this defense. They really invested in the secondary this past draft, where they went back-to-back corner. Terran Arnold really struggled with penalties, but I mean the potential's there. Ennis Rakestraw didn't get on the field as much because they were prioritizing Amik Robertson and other veterans. But I don't think secondary is the way to go, even though at the back end they just couldn't stop anybody. Yeah, I think edge is fine, really, because they have so much. Like, the roster is one of our favorites in the entire NFL.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's not a lot of places, so gambling on upside is something. And really, with Shamar Stewart, you're not doing it because of production. You're doing it because, this guy is athletic as hell, and he could turn into something that right now we're not seeing.
Yeah, I think that there's a huge balance between ranking ceiling versus floor in when you actually scout and like do like you're like, oh, this guy, he kind of sucks, but he could be good. He could be good. No, he doesn't suck. I'm not saying that. He just he pisses me off because he's so talented naturally.
Hey, me too.
That he doesn't have the insane sack. He should have 12 sacks. He should have 10 sacks. That's not even asking that much. But 37 total pressures. And I know that you look over at Nick Gordon and he's got 36, but he had a 17.3 pass rush win rate. So he just didn't turn his pass rushes that he won into pressures.
Right.
While Shamar didn't even have them. He had 11.3. That is a defensive lineman number. That is a D lineman number. Interior defensive lineman. So, I digress.
Yeah, and then with Philly, it's one of the best rosters in football, probably the best if you just look on paper. But if there's one place that they're going to need some, not necessarily improvements, but fill in the gap in some way, shape, or form, Brendan Graham is retiring. Josh Sweat, who was our defensive player of the Super Bowl, because he had 2.5 sacks, and Zach Bond, who was a first-team All-Pro after, kind of busting out in New Orleans, had a breakout year. All of those guys free agents, so they need some kind of depth as a secondary pass rusher. So Nick Gordon, I like that fit as well.
Yeah, Zach Bond was first of all linebackers, and Cooper DeJean was first of all cornerbacks in ratings. So there you go. And he fell to 40 because he was injured.
Yeah, that was stupid.
All right, Luther Burden. Washington Commanders get Luther Burden, and I'm going to tell you right now, this is a bad decision. If you're going to allow Luther Burden to play with, if this happens, we're going to have some real issues because all of a sudden it's going to be one of those things where Jaden Daniels and Luther Burden and Terry McLaurin are just, it's going to be bad, man.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to address receiver in some way. 5 out of 7 wide receivers are unrestricted free agents, and Zach Ertz and Josh Bates and whatever, all the things. Need a true number 2 opposite Terry. I think that Luther Burden probably plays mostly in the slot at the next level, but I do think that how they run their offense, they run a lot of bunch, they run a lot of people in a lot of different places. I think he fits that. They were already the 7th overall offense.
Yeah,
and now you're adding Luther Burden the third to it. So
yeah. I just want to start with saying I don't expect him to be here.
No.
Even though I'm not as high on him in terms of maybe surpassing the Emeka Egbuka. Again, you'll have to look at our wide receiver rankings when we release those. But this is way too low for either of them.
Oh, yeah.
And so if Washington was able to not have to trade up and land one of these guys, I think it would be a big win for them. Obviously, it's a sore need, and just putting all the offensive pieces around him to succeed. Yeah, Luther Burden fits what they're trying to do. And, I think it would be a strong addition and be one of our best values or winners
of the first round. Yeah, for sure. Dustin, what do you think?
I am a certified Luther Burden hater, as we've discussed.
I love it.
But even with that said, you and I have talked about him back when we were doing our college football videos. His athletic upside is insane. And he's just one of those guys, like you said, for the Commanders, putting him with McLaurin and Jaden Daniels, it could be incredibly fun to watch that.
that is one of the things too. Like we talk about fits and we talk about like this type of thing. Like you put Luther Burton on that team, and it's a special matching.
Yeah.
When you just talk about who they already have. So that's kind of he was first team All SEC. Like the reason he's and he wasn't the best like if you just look at stats on his own team, but
Yeah.
he is a problem because every other team has to really think about where he is at all times.
Yeah.
It does not matter punt return, kick return, on the field, wide receiver, anything. They have to know where he's at, and that's why he's such a problem. So
Yeah.
last guy on our whole draft. Oh, I definitely put Philly there, and it's
That's
not
Buffalo.
supposed to be Philly. I can fix it real quick because why Philly is just going to keep
Oh,
drafting
yeah.
defensive players. It's a problem.
Back since
Yeah, I'll let
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Yeah, Benjamin Morrison. He's another guy who should be a top 20 pick, but had a season-ending injury, so he was unable to play. November, December, into
Yeah.
January on a national championship team. So that would have really benefited him because Notre Dame isn't really in the spotlight a lot
Right.
because they're an independent, and a lot of times they're just easy schedule outside of the non-conference first game.
Mhm.
Again, not a shot, Dusty, after week one, but being able to
We all
just
watched it together. Don't worry.
Yeah, we did. But I mean, at the end of the day, Benjamin Morrison is a first-round talent that it's an unknown because of injuries. But the Buffalo Bills have a sore need, cornerback-wise, really just not a strength on that defense. I think they outperformed their talent level last year, but they've tried before in recent drafts with Kyrie Elam. Didn't work out, but Rasul Douglas, who's their best corner, is a free agent, and then Christian Benford leaves much to be desired. So it was kind of really tough to put Buffalo, honestly, because I could see them going in a couple different directions. They need some depth pieces on the defensive line as well, and then offensively, if they picked a receiver, if one fell to them, wouldn't be surprised because obviously, they were really relying on somebody like Khalil Shakir, instead of a Keon Coleman and Matt Collins for what it's worth. So yeah, I mean they. Kind of like a best player available approach, and that's just kind of why we selected him here.
Yeah, it's one of those things though that I'm a little worried that he does fall just because of the injury and things like that. I thought there could have been other options for those reasons, but at the end of the day, they have to fill some sort of cornerback position. I don't think you're going to get a Trey Amos jumping a Benjamin Morrison. I think, like I said, maybe Zaria Thomas could, but I don't know that Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston, Savon Revel. It depends how you looked at Savon Revel versus Benjamin Morrison in 2023. So it's like, I think you have to kind of, if they're going to go corner, this is the best corner available, and hopefully he comes back to, health from last year.
At the very moment, unless they kind of address this position a different way via free agency,
Right.
Which they don't have much space to do anything. I feel like this is kind of like we're going to get the position right. Whether it's corner, we ended up deciding on quarterback. I feel like we're going to get the position right, but we're just unsure of who exactly.
Who's going to be there.
That's kind of how it's going to really come down to with Buffalo. And again, because they traded some extra capital, in previous years and not having cap space, who knows if they just kind of want to get out of the first round entirely. They did last year with, trading back,
Twice.
allowing their rival to get Xavier Worthy, and then going with Keon Coleman in the first pick of the second round. So there's a precedent for both. And on top of that, like you said, with corners falling the way they did, that doesn't necessarily have a hindrance on how they can perform at the next level. But draft capital-wise, we're doing a mock, we're doing a prediction on who's going to land where.
Yeah.
And so a lot of guys like Cooper DeJean, who I would have put a decent amount of money that he was a first
rounder.
Lock,
Oh, yeah.
that he was not only a second rounder, but mid-second rounder is what he ended up falling to. And it was just, and it instantly, bit a lot of people in the butt at the end of the day. So yeah, with Buffalo, that's kind of how I view it right now.
No, I completely agree. That was our last pick. I'm gonna stop the sharing because we've been here for a while, hanging out. Are there any last second, just questions and things that we want to talk about the last about the mock draft? Man, holy crap, that was a good one, Dustin.
Yeah, I mean, do we think Arizona's gonna screw up as usual, or actually make a good pick and I'll have something to cheer for next year?
It just depends who's there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if James Pierce would have been a guy that I think would have made a lot of sense over Jalen Walker, but I just don't think we could have put James Pierce over Jalen Walker when Jalen Walker was going to 8 in like every draft to the Carolina Panthers or 9 to the New Orleans Saints and things like that. So
Yeah.
just kind of, I think there's some options.
Yeah.
We just don't know yet.
I think the opportunity is there because I mean, man, we picked just a bad trio of teams to just have our allegiance
Oh,
to. You
gosh,
know, all three
I
of
know.
us being a Raider, Cardinal, and a Cowboy fan. Like, get
It's
out
tough.
of here. But at the end of the day, I don't trust either of our teams. Like, we're not going to be the ones picking quarterbacks. I don't think, at least. But with people getting moved down the board because of other teams doing that, I don't know if we will take advantage, either of us, in doing best
Right.
player available or
Yeah.
picking the right thing. And in term of that, that's going to push people down the board. And so if a Walter Nolan or a like you said, a James Pierce, like there's all those guys I feel like is very reasonable to be on the board.
Yeah.
And so it's just whether or not you take advantage of it. But the opportunity will be there. It's not like I don't think it'll be something similar to a couple years ago when Trayvon Diggs, we had, or at least I did, have Dallas selecting him at 17. And because somebody got taken right before him, they just hated the position and they punted. And or no, actually, CeeDee Lamb fell to them for no freaking reason.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I appreciate that as well, Mr. Henry Ruggs. But at the end of the day, like we were just like, oh, they're going corner. They don't need a receiver. And it's like, oh, CeeDee Lamb's here. Cool. And then for some reason, Trayvon fell all the way to the second round. They ended up selecting him. So Arizona's kind of in a similar boat too. It's just like, oh, this guy's here. Why? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if it's not like that, then at the end of the day, the only person I could say, oh, they're not going to pick him is Tyler Warren because Trey McBride is him. That's the only
Fair.
That's the only
Yep.
guy that I could rule out falling and still not selecting.
I think there's a lot of guys that and we talked about this before. I would rather be picking outside the top 10
Yep.
and this season because there's just not that many first round grades. So if that was the case, I think you're in a better spot than even the Raiders, unless we do get the guy like a Mason Graham to fall to us, or like one of the defensive players in the draft. Like we have to have someone fall for it to be worth it to me. But
Makes sense.
that's the end of it. That was our first mock draft 1.0. Please go like, comment, subscribe. We need to say that more often. But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us and getting going through this hour and 48 minutes with us, and hopefully y'all like our picks. If you don't, please tell us who you think should go to your team or who fits best with who, and we love those types of things too. So
yeah. I mean, whatever allegiance you have, it doesn't matter. I wanna get some interaction and say who you liked and if you didn't like who we put in, who would you rather have if they didn't go the route that we position them to do.
Right.
But one thing I can say was it was a fun time being the first time to actually put pen to paper and put guys in slots. I love doing mock drafts all the time, and this one is going to be completely flipped upside down. I already know it. By the time we do our mock 2.0 in a month from now, essentially, or a week after the combine, essentially. So it's a lot of fun. It's going to be changing a lot, but I think we did a good job.
Absolutely.
Last word, Dusty.
Yeah, what you got?
I'm just going to say thank y'all very much for joining us for our 2025 NFL Mock Draft 1.0.
See y'all later.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank y'all.